Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today, as he does every Legal Friday, Alex Ooley. Alex, of course, is an attorney in Southern Indiana. He also has the Forge of Freedom podcast. Alex, thanks for coming along today. And how's the podcast been going, dude?
Yeah, it's going good. Thanks for having me. First of all, it's great to be with you. And the podcast is coming along. I feel like I'm kind of getting my feet underneath of me and starting to get some engagement and feedback from the viewers. So it's going well. I'm really enjoying it and hope to keep it going for some time. So
Very
going
cool.
well.
Yeah, I remember when I was just first starting out in podcasting, to get feedback of any kind was just shot you over the moon, and to a great extent that's still the case. That's why I love doing this show live, working without a net, so to speak, because of the instant feedback, because we get people interacting live right away. It's part of the reason I love doing this show the way we do it. Let's see here, and by the way, I do want to mention, if you are catching us live, you can comment on either the Facebook or YouTube videos for the Polite Society podcast. I will guarantee you we get those right away. If you can, and then we'll discuss your comments on the air. If you're watching us anywhere else and you comment and you don't see us talk about your comment, I may not be getting it. Just pop over to the Polite Society podcast pages, pop your comment in there, and I will get it. Let's go ahead and get started today, Alex. We talked about this. It's been over a year ago, but I do want to bring up a topic that we talked about previously. I think it's a good reminder, and I might even have questions myself that have cycled up over the past year or so. But to start with this week, we want to talk a little bit about you're armed, as you should be, going about your daily life, and all of a sudden there's red and blue lights in your rearview mirror. You're getting pulled over. What do you do now?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting topic, and there are, of course, different advice out there about how to handle this. But something to keep in mind first and foremost is that traffic stops can be dangerous because the law enforcement officer who has pulled you over doesn't know who you are. And if you're not sensitive to that, the situation can escalate quickly. So know that the officer doesn't have a clue who you are, doesn't know you from a criminal or a gangster going up and down the highway or interstate. So that's the first thing I'd like to point out is be sensitive to that. Officers have limited information about you. Once you are pulled over, though, I encourage people, especially if it's dark out, turn on the light in your vehicle, the cab light, put your hands on the steering wheel, and wait for the officer to walk up beside your vehicle. In some states, of course, it's also important to know whether or not you have a duty to inform the officer that you are, in fact, carrying a firearm. You can. It used to be the case in Ohio. They've since changed their law. There is no duty to inform in Ohio. There is in Michigan and I believe in a few other states, but I don't know them off the top of my head. I seem to recall that Texas may have been one, actually, but I could be wrong about that. But certainly Michigan. So if you have a duty to inform, make sure you inform them immediately, because in some states, if it's not an immediate acknowledgement or information to the officer, that could be a crime. So know whether or not you have that duty to inform. And in some states, simply handing the officer your license to carry a firearm, if you have a license, is enough. But make sure you know the nuances of that. The next thing is that there's this question about whether you should, if you do not have a duty to inform by law, whether you should still inform the officer that you're carrying a firearm. I get both sides of the argument here. Some people say, hey, it's none of their business whether or not I'm carrying my firearm. Others say, no, you might as well tell them that may put the officer at ease, because especially if you're licensed, the officer knows that people who carry a firearm and are licensed to carry a firearm are generally more law-abiding than the rest of the population. In fact, people who have a license to carry a firearm are more law-abiding statistically than law enforcement officers, and many officers know that, and it may put them at ease. The other thing is that if the officer finds out later during the stop that you're carrying and you didn't inform him, that may put him in a little more anxious position, and you want to try to make it as smooth a stop as possible. Go ahead, Paul. Were you going to say something there?
When you brought up duty to inform, you are correct. I brought up handgunlaw.us. Texas is a duty to inform, by the way. So is Michigan, where both you and I will be the end of July. And one that I know because it's close to me and I get there every once in a while, so I know this just because I interact with them so often, is Nebraska Nebraska is the only state I know that does this. They are duty to inform an EMT if you are getting medical care. If you're getting care by an ambulance crew, you must inform the EMTs, not just law enforcement. So.
Oh, interesting. Well, that's a great point too, Paul. And you mentioned handgunlaw.us. That's one great resource to find out this kind of information. And the person who runs handgunlaw.us, I know he stays in touch with the attorney general offices in the states to make sure that his website is up to date. And of course, he can't update it immediately, but I know from personal experience in Indiana that he updates it very quickly. So if nothing else, it's a great starting point, and he has links to the statutes themselves. So if you want to see the original source, it's a great resource to find the original source as well. But he's got a great digest of the law, and that's how you would a great place to start to figure out if you have a duty to inform, among other sorts of issues, where what places are prohibited, how do you obtain a license, where your license is recognized, etc. All that information is at handgunlaw.us, so it's a great resource.
The other thing that Handgun Law has that I like is they've got a, let me see here, I just hit the link, and must inform officer, and they automatically, there's just one link, and you can see all the states where you must inform. Wow, North Dakota, I was just scrolling through. North Dakota, do you have to notify in North Dakota? Yes/no. No, if you have a permit license issued by North Dakota or a state they honor. Yes, if you're a North Dakota resident carrying under permitless carry. Okay.
That's weird.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, there's just to go real quickly down the list: Alaska, which that surprised me; Arkansas, California, District of Columbia, of course, Hawaii, Louisiana, Maine, Michigan, Nebraska, and that is that special exception I talked about, New Jersey, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, South Carolina, and Texas. Those are all the must-inform states.
So that's really strange about North Dakota. I wonder what the rationale is there. If you have a license, either in North Dakota or in a state that they recognize the license, you do not have to inform. But if you are exercising your rights without a permit, then you do. I guess the thinking is that if you have a license to carry a firearm, they'll know that maybe when they run your license. I'm not sure. But it doesn't mean you're carrying necessarily.
I have never experienced this myself. I've driven in Virginia a ton when I used to be a truck driver. I've never driven my personal vehicle in Virginia. My understanding, excuse me, sorry. My understanding is in Virginia, when they start the process of pulling you over, they run your plate on your car. It'll come back and tell them, at least if you have Virginia plates, whether you have a license to carry or not. So they're going to know, before they ever actually hit their lights, they know whether you've got a permit or not. And I don't see them under must inform, because Texas is the last alphabetically. So, wow.
Yeah, interesting. But there's this question, and I'm going back to the traffic stop here itself. Is tell people, keep your hands on the steering wheel until the officer instructs you otherwise. But part of that is remaining still. You don't want to make any what are called furtive movements or sort of erratic movements, because the officer doesn't know if you're going for a weapon, doesn't know what you're up to. And those furtive movements are movements that can quickly escalate the traffic stop into something far worse. So keep your hands on the steering wheel. Don't make any rapid or erratic movements. If you do inform the officer that you have a firearm, don't tell the officer, "I've got a gun," in a threatening manner or a manner that is intimidating in any way. Just tell the officer calmly and politely, "Officer, I'm exercising my right to carry a firearm. It's in my holster or wherever it is," and ask him how he'd like to proceed. The officer will normally say, "As long as you keep it where it is, I'll keep mine where it is." So most officers will be perfectly fine and even more comfortable that you're being forthcoming with them. So be polite and be courteous. And then wait for instructions. And make sure if the officer gives you instructions that are not clear, that you ask for clarification. Because if the officer says, "Hey, give me your license and registration," and your license happens to be in your wallet by your firearm, you want to make sure that you let the officer know that and convey and have clear communication with the officer. And then sometimes officers give orders or instructions that are not clear. So if you are unclear about what the instructions are, make sure you ask for clarification before you make any movement, especially toward the firearm.
Absolutely. I do not know that I do own a couple pairs of jeans. I haven't worn them in a long time, and mostly what I wear them for is for physical, work outside. When I'm out in public, and the only pants I wear, with the exception of a few, are cargo pants, what a lot of us in the gun world call 511s. Although I've only got one pair of 511 brand, but they're cargo pants. I've taken to carrying my wallet in the cargo pocket on my right leg. That way it is so easy if I were to get pulled over, either in a car or on the bike, as you get to the side of the road, you just reach down to your cargo pocket, put the wallet up on the dash, and yes, my bike has a dash, and you wait for the officer. And then at that point you can say, "Officer, I do have a concealed carry permit. I am carrying at this point. How would you like to proceed?" Also, I will say this: if you're getting pulled over and you're on a motorcycle, turn the thing off. Turn your car off. If it's 110, the car's not going to heat up that fast. The officers will probably tell you to start it back up again. If it's 30 below, same thing. You're not going to lose all the heat instantly. But it sets them at ease. And if you're riding a motorcycle, take your helmet off. At least start the process, and don't chuck it or anything. But calmly start taking your helmet off. They're going to want to see you anyway.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Paul. And I've heard this advice. I think it was from Mossad Ayub, but I can't recall exactly what the source was. It was somebody who had law enforcement experience, and they said that when they know the vehicle is off, that puts them at ease, because there are officers who are injured, sometimes intentionally, by people who drive off in the vehicle or put the vehicle in reverse as the officer is walking up to the vehicle. Sometimes it's inadvertent, but the officer is, to your point, put at ease if the motor is not running when they walk up to the vehicle. And also, it makes it easier to hear and to communicate effectively. So I think that's a good strategy for a few reasons.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like you said, be cooperative and wait for instructions and make sure the instructions are clear. So if the officer asks you to step out of the vehicle and that they want to take over the firearm or take control over the firearm, this is not the time to put up a fight about your rights or your rights being violated. Just make sure this is a sensitive situation. So make sure this is that you follow instructions carefully and that you cooperate with the officer in this regard.
Yeah, I'm going to say if the officer wants to see the firearm, I'll say, well, I'll pull my shirt up, but you're drawing it, pal.
Yeah. I would not hand the firearm to the officer. You would need to let the officer disarm you, because if you are going to disarm yourself in front of the officer, that's a situation that could go wrong very quickly.
Yep.
The other thing I tell people too is, if you put your firearm in the glove box, do not put it on top of your license, registration, insurance information, because when you open the glove box, your gun's going to be right there, and if you haven't told the officer about it, it's gonna be a problem. So it's not a good spot to keep your firearm, but if it is there, don't put it on top of your insurance and registration information.
I'm going to say that this is not going to be very popular, but the best way to avoid this whole thing, try and follow the speed limit. At least get near the speed limit. Don't roll red lights. Don't come to a full stop before you make that right turn on red. Check for signs that say you can't make a right turn on red, and if there is one, don't. Just follow traffic laws, and you don't get pulled over very often.
Yeah. Being an armed citizen makes you more aware. In general, even if you're just walking around in public, you're more aware. But even like you say, Paul, if you're driving a vehicle, it should, as a byproduct, I think, make people more conscientious of their driving habits.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's. Anything else you want to cover on this? Or I got a couple news stories I want to talk about.
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Once again, I can't emphasize enough: know the law where you are, because a duty to inform is a critical issue. So, handgunlaw.us is a great resource for that.
Matter of fact, let me go ahead and get that. I'm going to go ahead and post that link in both of the Facebook and the YouTube streams here, and so that anybody who's watching us live can go over and get it. And as we get to news stories, I do want to remind everybody, and even if you want to talk about, even if you want to talk about you've been pulled over and this and that, we cannot give out legal advice, but if you want to discuss that, put a comment in, or if you're going to want to discuss either of the stories we're going to be getting to here in a second, you can comment and we'll get your comments up and get them on the air. First story I got, Alex, this came off of HayesPost.com. House Republicans passed a resolution that would repeal a Biden administration rule tightening federal regulations on stabilizing braces for firearms, an accessory that has been used in several mass shootings across the U.S. over the last decade. Resolution passed 219 to 210 on nearly party line votes after a contentious floor debate where Republicans accused the administration of executive overreach and Democrats condemned a bill they said would help kill people. 2 Democrats voted in support and 2 Republicans voted against it. I want to and I'm going to go ahead and just skip over the rest of the story here. But my take on this, Alex, is we're going to win this in court. It's going to take some time, and even the Fifth Circuit, when they finally issue their final ruling, should we win that ruling, right now we've only got an injunction. Even when that goes through, that'll cover Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. We got to get other circuits to weigh in to cover more of the nation. And this bill would be great, but Biden's never going to sign it. It would have to go through under a huge omnibus bill. in order for him to sign it, the same way we got national park carry out of the Obama administration. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I don't think this bill is going anywhere. I think our hope of success in overturning this ATF final rule is in the courts. And luckily, there has been some success, as we know, and we've talked about on previous shows, in the Fifth Circuit, both at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals and within the district courts there in the Fifth Circuit. So, but as you say, we've only got injunctions at this point, which is good news, but it's not a full decision, a final decision on the merits of the case. But the injunction does mean that the courts believe the plaintiffs are likely to prevail on the merits. And the oral argument is set in a couple of weeks in the Mock v. Garland case. So there should be a decision soon after oral argument on June, I believe it's the 29th. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it's in a couple of weeks. And I expect that the plaintiffs, the Firearms Policy Coalition, will be successful in the Fifth Circuit there. And then eventually it will likely reach the Supreme Court, probably in the fall, if everything goes well. So this is a long battle yet to fight, but the hope of getting this final rule overturned is in the courts, not in the legislature, especially with Biden as president.
One of my big frustrations, Alex, is we've been calling him Saint Benitez, Judge Benitez out of California, federal judge. He's not on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, but he is in the Ninth Circuit. He's in Southern California. He got kicked back the assault weapon ban case from the Ninth Circuit, and he's been sitting on that, and we've been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for a decision, and we just continue to wait. There was a story out earlier this week. He did issue an order that California had to pay attorney's fees for like 10 different gun rights organizations, but he's still not issuing the ruling on that case. Man, that's frustrating.
Yeah, the courts are not fast, and unfortunately, people's rights are being violated in the meantime. And unfortunately, the legislature in California is not going to change anything either. So our final hope really still rests with the courts, even in that situation. But the courts are not quick. The wheels of justice certainly turn slowly.
They absolutely do. One more story I want to get to today. Santa Monica, California. This is off surfsantamonica.com. The City Council on Tuesday unanimously directed staff to draft an ordinance that would be the best gold standard for placing restrictions on gun sales and ownership. The measure, which must be prepared within 60 days, could ban the display of guns at the city's only licensed gun retailer and impose an annual fee on gun owners to pay for gun safety programs. It would also require that gun sales be videotaped and that gun owners safely store guns at home and in vehicles, report guns that are lost or stolen, and carry liability insurance. We want to make it as difficult as possible for guns to get into the hands of folks who might do something, said Council Member Carolyn Torsis, who co-sponsored the discussion item. Santa Monica, that's down by Los Angeles. There was one up south of Sacramento, and I'm trying to there's a city that did something similar, at least with the insurance, late last year, and that one still we've heard nothing about it for, I'm going to say, 6 months.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think I recall the city you're talking about, but I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head either.
I want to say Santa Rosa is what I want to say. Santa Clarita.
That might be right,
maybe.
But yeah, there's the problem is like California, New York, New Jersey, all sorts of states and municipalities in after Bruin are desperate to do something to satisfy their constituents or to posture politically to maintain their power. And unfortunately, they're doing it at the expense of law-abiding citizens, because here they say we want to be limiting guns getting into the hands of people who might do something. And what are any of these proposals going to do besides keep firearms out of the hands of law-abiding citizens? It's going to do nothing to keep them out of the hands of criminals. And I've yet to hear a proposal from any of these folks that would, in fact, have any effect or curtail criminals in any way.
Yeah. Let me this comment in here real quick. The lefty loonies like to slice gun rights off little by little, full autos, assault rifles, pistol braces, standard capacity magazines, etc. Pretty soon they'll be coming after your Remington Wingmaster. Well, and I don't...
That's exactly.
Trying to remember, Gabby Giffords had an interview with Slate, and she said this part you're not supposed to say out loud. At the end of the interview, she admitted she wants all guns gone. And that's, I think, the ultimate goal for the other side, period, man.
Yeah, well, and that'll never happen, because then only criminals will have guns, but the guns won't be gone. So even in their ideal world, it couldn't happen. But the other problem is that, like the comment said, it's death by 1,000 cuts. And no matter how many steps they'll take, they'll say, well, it just wasn't enough. We've got to do more. And the end of that is the mass confiscation of firearms from law-abiding citizens.
Yeah. I want to get your opinion on one thing. There's several people that I know that have gone away from, including a few in Second Amendment media, who have gone away from saying law-abiding citizens to changing it to responsible gun owner, because there's a point when I'm not going to obey your law. And I think we're seeing that with a lot of people now with the pistol brace rule, because less than, I know it's less than 2% of the people that own pistol braces sent in the form to get them legalized with the ATF.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I love that point, actually, because this issue is being litigated. Do nonviolent felons lose their right to keep and bear arms? They're not law-abiding. They have a criminal conviction, but it's for a nonviolent felony. And I don't think that nonviolent felons should lose their right to keep and bear arms. So I think you're right, Paul, that we should be careful about the language that we use when we describe people who should have the right to keep and bear arms, or do have the right to keep and bear arms. It's just a matter of whether or not the government recognizes that right and will protect that right.
Absolutely. All right, well, we are down near the bottom of the hour. As I always do, I want you to promote Forge of Freedom podcast and plug anything else you want to plug, man.
Yeah, it's been great to be with you, Paul, on the show. And, of course, Forge of Freedom podcast is available on YouTube, Rumble, and all the most popular podcast streaming platforms. Last week I had a candidate for governor here in Indiana, a libertarian candidate, Donald Rainwater. He talked about firearms, but he also talked about tax reform and administrative reform and education reform. And I have a lot of guests on the show to talk about things that we can do to create a freer life for people as individuals, but also to create a freer world. We talk about firearms every Monday. I have my father, who's also an attorney and a firearms instructor, on as a guest, a regular guest on Monday, Gun Day, and we release a more broadly or generally freedom-related topic on Sunday. So if that's of interest to you, definitely check that out, Forge of Freedom. It's on YouTube. We also have a website now. I can announce that as well. We have a website, forgeoffreedom.com.
All right. And for those of you who are watching on the Polite Society Facebook or YouTube pages, I just posted the link to the YouTube page for Forge of Freedom in there. So all you got to do is click. You don't even have to go search for it. It's right there for you. That does wrap up our show today, and I do want to encourage everybody, please do come join me tomorrow evening. Tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Central Time, Mike Piwowarski, Rob Morse, and Charles Heller are going to be here for the weekend edition of The Bullet. We'll talk about all the stories of the week, and I'm really looking forward to that. It's been too long since I've had Charles Heller on. So that's going to do it for us today, everybody. Thank you for watching. Podcast listeners, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.